Good morning, everybody. Yesterday, we unveiled our first 4 shadow cabinet positions. There are some in the press who say, well, how on earth can you call yourselves the opposition as the Conservative Party have more members of Parliament than you do? Well, that's true, although our numbers do seem to be growing over the last couple of weeks. But I would say this, we have led for the last 200 opinion polls. Our average lead is between 9 and 10%. And as we face now an even bigger set of elections on May the 7th than it might have been a couple of days ago, I think there is little doubt that we are the main challenge to Labour on May the 7th and in the country. And so accordingly, all 4 that have got their positions will start to make their own pitches, start to build their own departments, and that begins today with Robert Jenrick, our Shadow Chancellor. But before I introduce him, I've been asked by several members of the press to comment on the events in the Chagos Islands this morning, which I will do. As you know, the Chagossians were brutally evicted from the islands over 50 years ago. And what happened yesterday was a group of 4 of them, and remember, these are British passport holders going on to British territory, went back to start to build a permanent settlement and to rebuild their lives. There are a further 300 Chagossians living in the United Kingdom ready to go at a moment's notice once the settlement is viable. They were this morning served an eviction notice on behalf of the British government and told that unless they comply, they could face up to 3 years in prison. Just think that through. You can cross the English Channel in a dinghy, dispose of your passport and iPhone at the 12-mile line, and we will put you up in a hotel, give you 3 meals a day, dental care and medical care. And your chances ever of being evicted are less than 2%. And indeed, even on Diego Garcia, illegal immigrants arrived on Diego Garcia some years ago, and they were looked after, houses were built for them, schools were built, and yet this attempt by a group of people to reclaim their birthright, their rights of national self-determination, are being thwarted or threatened by the British government this morning. What about their human rights, Lord Hermer? What about them? What about their right to a family life? We are looking right now at every possible legal avenue we can to support these people and their brave quest to rebuild their lives as Chagossians. Thought I'd get that out of the way because I know the news channels wanted a comment on it. Now, as I say, today is the first rollout, and it'll be Robert Jenrick, our Shadow Chancellor. You can expect all of the others to come out and do their press conferences and set out their terms over the course of the next 2 weeks. If anyone doubts it, we're serious, we mean business, we intend to win the next general election. It's as simple as that. So before Robert takes the stage, I'm going to show you a short video, then it's over to him. Thank you.
In politics, you're always asked, who do you admire? This former Prime Minister or that? Winston Churchill, naturally. But the truth is, and in life you always regret not saying this to the people you love when you have the chance. It's always been my dad. I haven't been back here in 20 years, at least. It hasn't changed that much. I used to do my homework in the office up there. We didn't have a computer at home. No computer at home, try telling that to my girls. And on Saturdays, my sister and I used to clean the brass on the frets, and we used to smell of brasso all weekend. My dad was born in Manchester, left school at 16, became an apprentice, worked in industry, worked his way up. He came here to the Black Country to run an old foundry. It was called Cannon Industries because it had made the cannons for Wellington's army. My dad was very proud of that. Most of that industry is gone now, and with it, a lot of history, sense of identity and pride. When you stood here, you used to see the remains of the old collieries, the pits, where those offices are now. Those were tough times. The economy was broken. Businesses were going to the wall, inflation, unemployment. It didn't feel like Britain was heading in the right direction. My dad's job didn't work out. Instead of getting a new one, he set up a business. He retrained as a gas fitter, got a white van, ran it from around our kitchen table, then from the shop, and then from a factory down the road. Like everyone starting a business, it was hard. I remember sitting at the bottom of the stairs late at night, listening to my mum and dad worrying about the bills, worrying whether the bank might repossess the house because it was mortgaged for the business. Every entrepreneur, every small business owner knows what that feels like. Life isn't smooth, especially in the tough times. My dad worked bloody hard, all hours. He cared about his employees, saw them as an extension of his family. He cared about his reputation. He used to say, your reputation is all you've got in business. He was careful with his money and careful with other people's money too when he had investors. Success didn't come instantly to him, but he got there in the end. He built a business, created good jobs. In fact, it's still going 40 years later. And just shy of his 85th birthday, he was still going into the office at his desk at 9 a.m. in the morning. I'm in politics for people like him and the people who worked with him, or reform call Alarm Clock Britain. The people who get up early, put the hours in, do the right thing. There's no shortcuts to turning things around, but I know it can be done. We have in the past, we can do it again. We can bring bills down. We can bring back good jobs. It's going to require strong leadership, determination, a government that actually takes care with your money and savings, a government that believes in this country and its people. Britain's economy is broken, but it can be fixed. Britain needs reform.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Nigel. It's very good to be here. Now, look, I read in the papers this morning a commentator saying that they thought that I'd been appointed Reform's shadow chancellor because I had experience sat around the cabinet table. And of course, there's truth in that. I sat around the cabinet table and I saw up close what government gets right and what it gets wrong. And that is going to be important if Reform forms the next government of this country. But the table that I sat around that was actually the most formative to me was not the one in Downing Street. It was the one at home with my mum and dad in Wolverhampton in the 1980s. It was growing up there that I saw my dad, Bill, who you just watched in that video, a man who was not born into a life of privilege, a Manchester lad. He moved to the Black Country to take up a job in a foundry. He'd left school at 16. He went to night school. He got some qualifications. And around that kitchen table, he set up a business. He started it there and with a white van on our drive. And it wasn't easy, as anyone who set up a business is a sole trader, has gone it alone knows. But just like all of those people who've done that, and are doing that right now across our country, through sheer grit and determination, he built that business. In time, he set up a shop, and then he had his own factory. He was able to build a more comfortable life for my mum, my sister, and me than he had ever been able to imagine when he was growing up. In building his business, he provided hundreds of jobs. Good jobs, secure jobs, the kind that offered families peace of mind, the chance to get on in life. But for too many people right now, across our country, those opportunities are fading. They're victims of a 30-year-long economic consensus which has failed, and mismanagement by a Westminster class who bet that just because Britain was a rich and powerful country, it always would be. They were wrong. In 1997, people's living standards in our country were closing the gap with America. Today, incomes are closer to Romania's than to those of the United States. And why is that? They spent money we didn't have, more than doubled our debt. They increased taxes to record levels. They failed to reform the public sector, where productivity has barely moved in 30 years. They blindly pursued net zero, driving industrial electricity prices to the highest level in the developed world and killing British manufacturing in the process, of the kind that I knew when I grew up in the West Midlands. They eviscerated the tax base. Today we have just 80,000 companies with a turnover of £5 million or more. That's a quarter fewer per capita than there are in the United States. The recent succession of prime ministers in my old party and now in Labour lacked the vision for what we could do to arrest our national decline. They were defeatist, and each in turn, they were defeated. The financial crash should have been a big wake-up call, the warning to address the profound structural weaknesses in our economy. The economic shock of COVID might have been another one. Build back better, we were told. Well, they were both missed, and it now falls to reform, to fix Britain with a new economic model. Now, at this stage, I understand you will be wary of false prophets. Many prospective chancellors have offered their diagnoses of the problems facing our country. They've even alighted on some of the same remedies in speeches much like this one. Before the election, I bet some of you in this room went to listen to Rachel Reeves. She pledged financial stability and investment. She said she would unleash the potential of British workers. And to a weary public, it sounded promising. The reality? Instead of offering stability, she's unleashed chaos. Benefit cuts in, benefit cuts out. Inheritance tax up, inheritance tax down. Almost every possible tax rise on a business or a worker floated in the pages of a national newspaper for week after week after week, with devastating impact on business confidence. A cabinet that is now at war, and a prime minister on the brink. What happened to the promised investment boom? It was driven overseas with punitive measures against investors, which in the case of non-doms could see the country actually lose money. Any juice left in businesses has been squeezed out by tens of billions in tax rises, all to pay for an exploding benefits bill. And what about those workers who Rachel Reeves promised to champion? They've been taxed more, and everyone in Britain, like the country itself, is poorer for it. Prices rising, unemployment up because of her destructive tax on jobs, especially amongst the young. Everyone feeling hard up. An economy no longer serving working people, held hostage by a trade union orthodoxy that we all thought we'd banished decades ago. As one of Keir Starmer's own cabinet ministers, Wes Streeting, said to his friend Peter Mandelson, "There's no growth strategy at all." The British people have been betrayed once again. They voted for change, and instead they just got more decline. They feel cheated, and they have every right to be. What Britain needs is to change course and to forge a new political economy. What Britain needs is reform. Now, today I'm here to explain Reform's approach to the economy. It's not going to be flashy. Some of it is rather technical, so I don't think we need the fireworks and the smoke machine on this occasion, Nigel. Sorry. But it is important. Firstly, Reform believes in fiscal responsibility. We believe Britain's rising debt must be brought under control. Why? Because right now, £1 in every 13 you pay in tax is spent just on the interest on the country's debt. It means we spend more on servicing debt than we do on our schools and defence combined. This year, the cost of borrowing reached the highest level since 2008, far above the level of the so-called mini-budget. Now, Andy Burnham recently said that the government shouldn't be in hock to the bond markets, that it should ignore the flashing red lights. Well, I say the opposite. If you need to borrow money to fund your spending, then you need to convince the lender that you have the wherewithal to pay it. I say to the bond markets that we respect you. The bond markets force governments to face up to difficult trade-offs. Reform welcomes that. Successive governments they've changed, they've broken their fiscal rules, all out the window. They've created what some have coined an idiot premium, where lenders simply don't trust the UK's word. That is costing taxpayers money. So it's got to end. Reform will prepare strict fiscal rules, will take advice from market participants in the period to come. We will instill a fiscal discipline that has been sorely missing, spending only what we can afford and never saddling future generations with the bill for our own profligacy. So the first thing a reform government will do is to bring Britain back from the brink of a debt crisis by cutting wasteful spending. The root of many of our problems is this. Successive governments have taken more and more of people's money, and they've wasted it. They've sprayed it around with no regard for how hard they've worked for it or their own priorities. They say that your money is needed for the NHS, for the police, for the armed forces, for the vulnerable. But more and more often, it's not going to them. It's going to those who don't need it or shouldn't be getting it. Council houses for migrants, foreign aid to rich countries, billions in welfare for foreign citizens, expensive new cars for those with mild anxiety, colossal payouts to fat cat executives of utility companies that are increasing, not cutting, people's energy and water bills. Reform will get rid of this endemic waste. The work to do this is already well underway. In the last few months, Zia Yusuf and Richard Tice, both highly accomplished, successful businessmen who know how to balance the books and to create jobs, have set out how we'll begin to cut wasteful spending. Reform will make £25 billion in annual savings through measures including ending use of universal credit for foreign nationals, raising the immigration health surcharge, and capping foreign aid at £1 billion. Because under a reform government, the interests of the British people will always come first. Additionally, Danny Kruger's plan to streamline the civil service will generate £4 billion in immediate savings from averted salary costs, plus £1 billion in averted pension liabilities for future taxpayers. Reform will be careful with taxpayers' money. Your money, because that is what it is. And we'll never forget that. And being careful with your money means tackling our exploding welfare bill. Look, in 2010, the Conservatives undertook commendable reforms to our welfare system. But as time went on, they let it completely spiral out of control. And it's got much worse under Labour. Reform will always protect the vulnerable, those who've worked hard but fallen on hard times. But on current course, 1 in 8 people are set to claim disability benefits in 4 years' time. That's almost 9 million people. The number claiming disability benefits for an attention disorder has more than doubled since COVID. We all know a significant number of these claims are spurious, and that we're just now giving up on over 500,000 young people who are being discarded as unfit to work. So our benefit system is broken. That's not fair, that's not right, and it is an economic and a moral disaster. That's why I commit to you today that if we developing the most comprehensive plan for welfare reform in British politics. Better, more serious, more rigorous than any other of the parties. And we will be setting that out in the months ahead. We will stop those with mild anxiety, depression, and similar conditions from claiming disability benefits, and instead do everything we can to encourage them into the dignity of work. We will reinstate in-person assessments and require clinical diagnosis to weed out those who are choosing a life on benefits. We will end the abuse of the Motability Scheme, where expensive cars are handed out for conditions like tennis elbow and paid for by working people who could never afford those same cars themselves. And we will make sure that only British nationals can claim benefits in the first place. But we need to go further, because at the moment, the system is not fair to those who pay for it. As a signal of intent today, Reform is changing our policy on the two-child cap for universal credit. The policy was well-meaning. We want to help British working families to have more children. But right now, we just can't afford to do so with welfare. So it has to go. As Reform's Shadow Chancellor, I'm ending it. A Reform government will restore the cap in full. We are the party of Alarm Clock Britain. We are a party of workers and not welfare. And because we're confident about the approach that we're going to take, we are very happy to have others mark our homework. Everything Reform promise will be fully costed. Accordingly, we will retain the Office for Budget Responsibility. Look, it is far from perfect. The Times recently ranked its performance near the bottom among UK economic forecasters. But the impetus for its creation was a desire to instill fiscal rectitude. And that is something that at Reform, we wholeheartedly endorse. So rather than abolish it, we will reform it. The OBR has consistently overestimated the short-term benefits of migration, and they've downplayed its long-term consequences. They've underestimated the dynamic effect of cutting taxes. So we will break up that cosy consensus and ensure it has proper diversity of opinion. We'll run competitions for super forecasters to join the body and pay proper competitive salaries to those who can most accurately forecast the impact of Treasury decisions. And we'll take a similar approach to the Bank of England. Under Reform, the bank will remain independent. The bank has served our country for over 300 years and has been a model for central banks the world over. But the bank must perform better. Its core mission is simple: keep bills down. And yet, for 52 of the last 56 months, inflation has sat stubbornly over its 2% target. Now, that's not all the bank's fault. Furlough played a part, as has some of the excessive public pay settlements. But the bank has taken its eye off the ball. So we will strip the bank of distractions which have been loaded onto it, and that includes the requirement for the bank to help the transition to net zero. The bank must be a more open institution, and the private sector properly represented on the Monetary Policy Committee. But the fact that the bank will remain independent under Reform will never stop us holding them to account for their mistakes, like the excessive quantitative easing after the financial crisis and during COVID. Reform's interest will always be keeping inflation low, because we are a party of working people, and that is how we keep working people's bills down. But it's not just stubborn inflation that's leaving working people poorer right now. The state is taking more of their money than ever before. Reform believes that taxes are far too high, and that cutting it is crucial to generating economic growth. We see the value in doing so wholesale, where tax clearly disincentivizes work and investment, and in a targeted way to spur investment in the growth sectors of the future, like the biotech industry. We've already set out how we will save businesses like pubs and farms from taxes that are making their business model impossible. We want a simpler, fairer tax system that incentivizes work, saving, and investment. That means fixing the absurd marginal tax rates that many people face in our country today. So we do intend to review the tax code in a program not seen since the landmark reforms of Nigel Lawson. But we also understand that we can't make tax cuts while running a huge deficit in the vain hope that the Laffer curve alone will do the hard work for us. That is why Nigel drew a line under the previous tax and spend commitments reform had made. As he said in his banking hall speech last year, given the dire state of debt and finances under Rachel Reeves, previous assumptions are no longer realistic. We will never make promises we can't keep to the British people. So we'll only cut taxes when we have generated the fiscal headroom necessary to make those tax cuts sustainable. And to those who question our approach, let me say this. We have seen what happens when this economic rule is ignored and fiscal discipline is thrown out of the window. Liz Truss went down the path of wild spending splurges alongside big tax cuts. The result was chaos. Mortgage payments soared. Working people suffered. Today, I give you my word that a reform government will never play fast and loose with your savings. And with the sure foundation that will come with fiscal stability, we're going to get this economy growing by backing businesses. We know that it's businesses, it's not the government, that are the engine room of our country's wealth. And unlike this Labour government, like this Labour cabinet, reform actually has people who've founded, who've run, who've grown businesses. We actually want businesses to succeed. Because when they succeed, they create well-paid jobs and careers. So people can perhaps buy a better car for their family or a bigger house so they can take a holiday or a second one. So they can have a meal out with the kids once in a while without having to worry about the bills. We want everyone to be a bit better off. I also want them to be able to get on, to thrive, not just to keep their heads above water. There's no shame in success. Reform believes doing well in life is never something to be embarrassed about. So reform will unashamedly champion British businesses of all sizes. Big businesses, yes, but also small ones, like my dad's, sole traders, and most importantly of all, new businesses, the risk takers, inventing things, solving problems, getting ahead. A reform government will leave you to run your business and to innovate, rather than forcing the lanyard class to run it for you. They don't understand innovation, they stymie it. That means no more mandates for HR or judges setting the wages. It means a return to meritocracy and the pursuit of excellence. So no more diversity targets on company boards. We will scrap red tape. We'll take every effort to make life easier, no matter how small it might seem, like allowing shops to open late or cafes and bars to put tables and chairs out of an evening without having to fill in endless forms to placate officialdom. We will make Britain the easiest place to open a bank account, and we'll reform bankruptcy laws so that we are a country of second and third chances for those who are willing to take a risk. But it's not just about an overbearing government getting out the way. It's also about government doing its job properly. And that begins by giving businesses confidence to operate in this country. Unlike the other parties, Reform understands that international investors hold deep concerns about sectarianism, crime, and infringements on freedom of speech, because we share them. Only Reform has the courage to tackle these threats to our way of life and our standing in the world. Crime is not normally part of economic policy, but Reform will treat it as such. We will ruthlessly pursue the scammers, the shoplifters, the tool thieves that make the lives of business people a misery. Under a Reform government, the era of impunity is over. It's time we had the backs of hard-working people who do the right thing, and they know Reform will. Now, I'm here speaking to you in the city, 40 years since the Big Bang put London on course to be the world's most important financial centre. But today, let's be honest about where we stand. The London Stock Exchange is struggling. Last year, $2.1 billion was raised in IPOs in the market. In the US, the equivalent was £36 billion, 18 times more. It's no coincidence that as the LSE was dropping, the FCA was enjoying a boom in staff numbers and budget. Recent reforms have clearly not been anything like commensurate with the scale of the challenge our capital markets face. They haven't created the investment culture that our economy desperately needs. Reform will rein in bureaucratic overreach. And as Nigel has said before, we will make London a global centre for crypto assets and digital finance. To compete with the US and others will require genuine creativity and incentives, not just tinkering, as we've seen in recent years. A totally different offer that capitalises on the unique strengths that London still holds. That is what we will set out to do, working with you, with the city, with business, to develop exciting, comprehensive plans. I had my first break in the city, as of course did Nigel, as a trader. We know that Britain needs a thriving financial services sector, and its relative weakness since the financial crisis has hit our productivity. Reform will work with you to bring about a second Big Bang, and we'll seize opportunities for better, nimbler regulation that Brexit offers. In financial services, yes, but also in data protection, environmental standards, and labour rights. We'll find the edges we can to deliver businesses advantages and, above all, higher living standards for British people. The spirit of deregulation that we are going to engender, of doing less and doing it better, is perhaps best needed in planning. Right now, government is actively stopping companies from building new offices, factories, data centres, labs, the things that would create well-paid jobs. It's also holding young people back from owning their own home and starting their own family. It is so broken that the last time house prices were this expensive relative to wages was in 1876. It's leaving everyone worse off. So Reform will liberate planning across city centres and industrial zones. It will make an immediate national priority of densifying inner East London and the building out of Cambridge. We will repeal the ridiculous EU nutrient neutrality rules that are preventing the construction of 100,000 homes for British families. And we'll go further. We'll create a permitted development right for research labs and data centres, streamline permission for factories to be built in our towns. And we're not content with stopping there. We will make sure that businesses have the grid connections that they need to invest in AI, robotics, and manufacturing. And we'll pass legislation to deliver the crucial investment projects that have been bogged down for far too long. If this government fails and continues to fail, we will pass emergency legislation to build a third runway at Heathrow if this project isn't ready to go the day that we take office. After May's local elections, these commitments will matter more than ever before, because it will be clear to everyone that Reform is truly the only national party. And we're going to take that responsibility very seriously. It's a responsibility to ensure that we create opportunities for all parts of our great country, not just London and the South East. Faced with the trade-offs, a Reform government will back transport projects with the biggest benefits to working people, not just the ones that are fashionable. That means boosting productivity, the ones that are really value for money, projects that matter to people, like bypasses, flyovers, roundabouts, buses, local rail, and yes, improving the state of our roads. We'll build the links between our towns, our villages and suburbs to allow people and goods to move rather than attempt to drive motorists off the road and into absurd 15-minute cities. Rest assured, under Reform, the war on the motorist will end. And a precondition for turning our economy around is the understanding that cheap energy is the driver of prosperity. So a Reform government will bring forward measures to cut your bills. That's lower energy bills for people and lower energy bills for businesses. That requires a fundamental change to our energy policy. When Westminster got swept away with net zero fanaticism, Richard Tice was a lonely voice of common sense. He saw, when most other people didn't, the fictional claim of hundreds of thousands of new green jobs. And that is why you can trust Reform to scrap the impossible targets that are driving energy costs through the roof. The farce of paying vast amounts of cash for intermittent and unreliable energy delivered at the wrong times. As Richard has announced, we will make full use of the gold buried in the North Sea to keep the lights on and to bring in tax revenue. We will rapidly scale up Britain's nuclear fleet to provide new, cost-effective, reliable sources of power, including by implementing the Fingleton Review of nuclear regulation in full. The result of these policies will be to help cut energy prices, the conditions that we need for Britain to reindustrialize, restore our proud industrial heritage, create good jobs for British working people again. And above all, Reform will change the country's economic strategy so that it serves you, the British people. So alongside the fiscal and the regulatory reforms that I've outlined, we will build a more resilient workforce. This will mean radically changing the scale of immigration, and it will also mean changing the makeup of those who are coming here. As Zia Youssef has already set out, and will do so more in the coming days, Reform will ensure that any new arrival is a net contributor to our economy. We want tens of thousands of the talented Brits who have emigrated in search of better opportunities and lower taxes to come back home and to contribute to our country. And trust me, under Reform, they will come back. We will also make foreign investors welcome in Britain again with a Britannia investment visa, like Zia and Nigel set out last year. Undo the economic self-harm done in recent years. Make this country attractive to the most talented people in the world. But in return, we will demand businesses invest in Britain's workforce, rather than hiring from overseas. Now, this will be a big change to our economic model, and it will go hand in hand with welfare reform. So businesses should begin preparing now, because there's no alternative. We must make our country more productive, better off, and more united. This new political economy that we are going to forge also requires recognizing that the world has fundamentally changed, and that, in turn, our trade posture has to change as well. Last month, the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, you didn't think I'd mention him today, argued that globalization has been weaponized by larger powers becoming a source of weakness for dependent countries. One line struck out to me. He said, "You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination." We agree. Yes, free trade with our friends and allies is advantageous, but we must respond robustly when our rivals consistently cheat the system and leverage dependencies to our disadvantage. Let me tell you this. A government led by Nigel Farage will never display the weakness Keir Starmer showed towards China. We will never ignore the interplay between economics and security, as some in the Conservative Party wish to do. And they are invariably the same politicians who, for instance, left our country with just enough munitions to last 8 days in war and little domestic capacity to manufacture more. Now, Reform do not believe in picking winners. But yes, we do believe in an industrial strategy to protect our strategic industries, like steel, defense, and car making. Because unless we change course now, we will trade a car made in Sunderland for a car made in Shenzhen. The Chinese building their middle class on the backs of ours. And in Reform, we'll never allow that to happen. We believe in levelling the playing field so that British businesses can succeed. We're not going to sit back if British businesses are being cheated or our critical industries should go extinct. We're going to salvage them. We're going to rebuild them. And similarly, we're going to have a clear-eyed strategy for the technologies of the future, like AI. We have an economy that is almost uniquely reliant on the services sector, just as it faces unprecedented disruption. Right now, there is no plan to respond to this or to benefit from AI, only to create a small number of jobs regulating it. Let's be a world leader in AI safety, we're told. Yes, but let's create value and jobs here in the UK. The government's indifference means that we're falling behind. But if we handle the incoming technological revolution nimbly, we can succeed, just as our country did in previous industrial revolutions. It's a generational challenge which must be met head-on by Reform. Now, today I've set out the foundations of Reform's economic plan. You'll be hearing plenty more from Nigel, from Richard, from Zia, and me in the coming weeks and months. This speech has barely scratched the surface of our ambitions for deregulation, for combating waste, for radically improving productivity in our public services like the NHS whilst keeping it free at the point of delivery, for how we will cut people's bills and leave more money in working people's pockets at the end of the week. There is a great deal of work to do. The list of challenges is vast. No one in Reform is pretending that this will be easy. The task of changing course after 30 years of failed economic policies is daunting. It will require deftness, care, and plenty of planning. We will be, in the words of Disraeli, conservative to preserve all that is good, radical to preserve and to remove all that is bad. Now, admittedly, Disraeli was not a very successful chancellor, it has to be said, for those of you who know your history. My inspiration is actually another Robert, also from the outskirts of the Black Country, Robert Peel. He was the architect of Victorian times, the architect of a Victorian age that was marked by both stability and prosperity. He was, as we will be, a reassuring revolutionary. If we get it right, we will see the benefits in real, immediate, catch-up economic growth, with more jobs, higher wages, and lower bills. We'll reduce the cost of energy and help to rebalance the economy. We'll fix planning to ensure that we lift productivity across the country. We'll cut migration, reform welfare to help draw people off welfare and benefits back into the workplace. We'll lower the tax burden and restore the incentives to invest and to build businesses. Rab Butler once described politics as the art of the possible. But right now, it seems that so many people have convinced themselves that progress is impossible, that the decline that we all see today is inevitable. Well, let me say this. Reform has the drive to defeat that defeatism, the energy to lift the gloom, and the courage to take action where others have flinched to get Britain back to its best. Britain's economy is broken, but be in no doubt, it can be fixed. We can turn our country around, but it can only be done with reform. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to have some questions from the media now. And the first one I have on my list is Keith from GB News. Keith.
Keith Farage, GB News. Mr. Jenrick, can you explain to GB News viewers how you plan to support Britain's lost generation? We've seen headlines saying that people are out of work, they're struggling. If you become Chancellor, what will you do to give young people hope in this country?
A very good question. Look, it's a very sad situation in the country right now. When I was leaving school, it felt like there was a sense of excitement and buzz still in this country. But when I go around talking to young people, they worry about their future, where they're going to get a job, where they can get on the housing ladder. If they do get a job, they'll be taxed to the hilt, the cost of childcare. It feels like the social contract has been shredded in recent years. Those who went to university during COVID had the best days of their life wrecked due to overbearing regulations. Reform is going to change that. We want to get good jobs back into this economy. And that means ensuring that we don't tax employers to the hilt, as Rachel Reeves has done with her job-destroying increases in national insurance. It means that we are going to ensure that we make the changes in our economy, as I set out today, to house building, to energy, to regulation, to actually spur a new generation of businesses and entrepreneurs, including young people, to create the jobs, the prosperity, the growth that is needed so that they can feel that this country has a great future. They don't need to go off and live somewhere else in the world. Quite the opposite. What we're going to set out to do is to bring all those people back to the UK. That if there's a reform government, people think that this is a country that is getting itself together again, that's heading in the right direction, where there is a sense of buzz and energy and excitement and dynamism. That's our mission. And at the heart of that is going to be young people and their prospects to get a good job and to get on the housing ladder. Thank you. I've got Katie Austin from the BBC.
Thank you. Thanks. Carrying on with young people, should younger workers be paid the same minimum wage as older workers? And as we're in the city, do you still think the Bank of England should stop paying interest on commercial bank deposits created by QE? Thanks.
Well, on the second point, I think there's a very legitimate issue there, which Nigel set out in remarks that he made at Davos, and we're going to be giving that careful thought. What you've seen in the speech that I've made today, everything that we do in the months and the years ahead is going to be the result of careful, strategic consideration, talking with market participants and coming forward with serious, robust policies. And we want to ensure that the City of London thrives again. You know, I had my first job in the city, Nigel did, at the heart of reform, and a number of people like Zia and Richard who have built highly successful businesses. We want to see this be the world's greatest financial centre, and it pains us to see what's happened in recent years, to see the London Stock Exchange on its knees, to see good jobs lost, not just to the United States, but actually losing out in a way we could never have imagined to competitors in Europe. Who would have thought there would be a more competitive tax regime in Greece or Portugal than there is in the UK today? That entrepreneurs will be going to live in Milan because they think that Italy is more stable than the UK. We're going to change that. As regards to young people, I think Nigel was one of the first to say when Rachel Reeves proposed increasing the minimum wage for younger workers that that was concerning because youth unemployment was a serious problem. You know, there's 250,000 jobs for young people have been lost since Labour came to power. For the first time this century, youth unemployment is now worse in the UK than in the EU. We all used to say that one of the good things in the UK was our youth unemployment versus those of European economies because of the structural reforms that have been done by prior generations. But that appears to have been reversed now, undermined by this Labour government. So we're going to think very carefully about how we can support more young people onto the housing, into the workplace. And yes, what they are paid is important in that equation because we all remember our first jobs. And you only have to go around the country today and talk to people, particularly in hospitality, who are struggling enough as it is and are asking, can we afford to take on somebody to work in a pub or a cafe or a restaurant who is a younger worker? Or should we perhaps choose somebody who's slightly older, a 25-year-old who's got more experience of the workplace? These are economically harmful decisions that were not thought through by Rachel Reeves, and I'm going to be holding her to account for them. Now, we've got Alex Rogers from Sky News next. Alex.
If you go ahead and scrap the Equality Act, do you intend to replace it with your own legislation that still enshrines some of its protections? And can you guarantee that no one will lose their job because of their sex, ethnicity, or disability under your plans? Thank you.
Yeah, so Suella Braverman will be setting out more details on this in the coming days. But let's be very clear. Over generations, a succession of important pieces of legislation were passed in this country to protect workplace rights, whether that was the Equal Pay Act or the Disability Discrimination Act. And we want to see those rights protected and handed on to future generations. What undoubtedly has been harmful to the way government works, to the way our economy operates, and to our society are the reforms that were taken forward by Harriet Harman in the final weeks of the Brown government when it was on its knees and on its way out, creating the public sector equality duty, for example, things that have led to perverse outcomes, like the Bank of England creating an internship scheme which white working class boys are not able to apply for. Well, I represent a working class town in North Nottinghamshire, and imagine me going to schools there and seeing kids who've been brought up in tough circumstances on a council estate in a former pit village and saying to them, oh, you can't apply to GCHQ or to the Bank of England or to an investment bank for their internship scheme because you're privileged, or because there's a piece of legislation that allows that to continue. That's not sensible. That's not common sense. And we want to change that and ensure equality before the law is the guiding principle in this country once again. Now, I've got Sam Merriman from the Daily Mail. Sam.
Thank you. Mr. Jenrick, one economic policy that you didn't mention, and I'm sure will be very important to many of your voters, is the triple lock. Will Reform commit to maintaining the triple lock into the next election? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we're going to be saying more about this in the coming days, but I've always been a supporter of the triple lock. It's incredibly important that we provide dignity and security to older people on fixed incomes in the last decades of their life, particularly in a time like this where there's such challenging circumstances with the cost of living. So I don't think your readers will be disappointed, but we'll say more in the coming weeks. And we've got Lucy White now from Bloomberg.
Thank you. You have spoken a lot about the policies that are being proposed by your colleagues Richard Tice, Zia Youssef, Danny Kruger.
But the policies that you've talked about today that have come from you are a lot along the lines of sort of fiscal orthodoxy that reformers always claim to eschew. Do you have any ideas of your own that you might be thinking about soon that will sort of shake up the city in any way? And if I can ask as well, on fiscal rules, do you have any yet? Do you have any idea what your fiscal rules might be?
Well, on the second point, we're not going to make up fiscal rules on the first day in my role as Shadow Chancellor. That would be the opposite of the approach that we're taking. As I hope you can see from what I've said this morning, we're going to be deliberative. We're going to be careful. Successive governments in my adult lifetime have made fiscal rules, they've changed them, and they've broken them. All the while, the public finances have ended up where they are today, in a mess. So we're going to talk to market participants, and we're going to develop strict, world-class fiscal rules ahead of the next general election. As regards to the policies I've set out today, well, look, I think these are radical policies. And if you don't see that, I'm surprised. We're saying that the economic and political consensus that this country has had, probably since 1992, is about to change because it's failed comprehensively and it's let down the British people. It's been an economic consensus predicated on mass migration. Well, that's going to go. And we're going to ensure that we are the grammar school of the Western world, where we only invite in the best and the brightest who are genuinely economic contributors to this country. And as a result of that, businesses will have to invest in the productivity of their own workers, technology, better skills, robotics, the things that will drive the economy forwards. We're saying that net zero was a disastrous mistake, peddled by governments of both political colours, put on acid by Theresa May and Boris Johnson, and that is gone. And instead we're going to go for cheap and reliable energy to actually make this country competitive again in the world. We're saying we're going to bring forward serious welfare reforms, not the ones that were written on the back of a fag packet by the Conservative Party in opposition a few months ago, but detailed ones. And we're prepared to take on difficult things, to think again sometimes, like I said today, where we've chosen to say we'll bring back the two-child benefit cap in full. Not that our previous policy wasn't well meant. Of course we want to help British workers to have families. But we're also aware that we've got to live within our means and we've got to find ways other than welfare to help to support them to fulfill their dreams. And we're going to pursue serious deregulation in all sectors, from small businesses right the way up to the city. And we're going to be spending the weeks and the months ahead developing those policies. But you can be assured this is going to be a big change. And the balance we're going to strike is exactly what I set out at the end of my remarks. We're going to be conservative when it comes to preserving what's important, like fiscal responsibility and stability in the economy. We're not going to do the mistakes that Liz Truss and Rachel Reeves have done. But we are going to be radical where we need to be to shake up this economy, shake it out of its malaise, and get it going again. That's the balance we'll strike, and it's the right one for this country right now. Now, I've got Alistair Lyon from City AM. Alistair.
Hi. Nigel Farage yesterday spoke about backing national champions, sort of taking stakes in British companies, and I actually interviewed Zia Yusuf, who floated taking a 10% stake in Rolls-Royce. Are there any other companies that you've sort of got your eye on? And how do you reconcile that with your promise just now not to pick winners and to leave businesses alone?
Well, I think I was very clear in my remarks about what our approach is in this regard. We don't believe in picking winners. What we do believe in is that there is, in the world today, an interplay between security and economics, which only the most naive would choose to ignore. And it surprises me that some are doing so, particularly in the Conservative Party, if you listen to the remarks in recent days. Those industries, like steel, like car making, like defence, we've got to ensure we salvage them and that we preserve strategically important industries. And we also won't be taken for a ride in the world. So if countries, particularly China, want to cheat the system, dump goods on our markets, then we'll respond accordingly. But we're going to take a wide-eyed approach that protects British jobs and ensures that we can reindustrialise in the sectors, the very specific sectors, that are critical to the future of our national security, principally, and our economy. I'll go to Martina Bett from The Sun. Martina.
Thank you, Mr. Jenrick. The Chancellor recently said that the student loan system is fair and reasonable. Do you agree? And if you don't agree, what will the reform government do to ease the burden for graduates? And just quickly, on the triple lock, based on what you've just said, it does seem like you do not agree with Nigel Farage that its future is up for debate. Could you clarify, please? Thank you.
Well, I think I was very clear on the triple lock that we're going to be saying more in time on that, but we're always going to protect pensioners. We're always going to protect pensioners because we want them to live in dignity and security. And we appreciate how life has been tough for them as a result of the bad policies of both the last Conservative government and this one, energy prices, for example. Those put immense strain on their budgets. With respect to students and student loans, look, the system is a mess. The rates of interest have been usurious recently, and the system has been set up to fail. I mean, you've actually got foreign citizens claiming student loans right now, costing the British taxpayer hundreds of millions, potentially billions of pounds, rather than that money going on skills training for our own people. We're always going to put the interests of the British public first. And we also want to ensure that our universities actually focus on what matters. Yes, some should and must be world-class institutions, and we take great pride in that. That is critical to the future of our economy. But we also want to see many of our universities get out of the market of Mickey Mouse degrees and focus on skills training for British people, particularly helping their own economy, the regional economies, to be in a stronger footing than they are today, and supporting apprentices and good quality vocational and technical degrees, exactly as Suella said in her remarks yesterday, and we'll be saying more of, I think, in the future. Very good. We've got Peter from The Telegraph.
Thank you. Two questions, if I can. Really quickly, you mentioned some sort of competition to join the OBR as if you would be a super forecaster. Can you give us a little bit more detail around what that might look like? And just one more. Last month, your leader, Nigel Farage, said the OBR is a Blairite-style quango, effectively dictating to elected politicians what they should or should not do. Was he wrong?
Well, on the point about who's staffed at the OBR, look, the OBR can't be a retirement home for people who worked at the Resolution Foundation. It's got to be for genuinely talented people who are able to produce world-class financial models. As the Times reported recently, I think the OBR was ranked second from bottom of all the forecasts in recent times. So only a fool would say that things have gone swimmingly at the OBR recently. We're going to change that. It means bring in people who have the skills that are necessary, and yet it does mean some competition to ensure that we actually get the right models so they're providing the right advice to the Chancellor of the day, and the budget process works well. We saw, I think without question, the worst budget process, I'd say in living memory, possibly ever, with Rachel Reeves' budget, where she went month after month, floating new tax rises, getting supposedly new forecasts, frankly lying about what the forecasts were when she went on the media to scare people. That's got to come to an end. So we're going to work with the OBR to reform it and make sure it's fit for purpose. But the broader point I was making is this. What was the reason for the OBR being created? Well, maybe there was some politics in it from George Osborne. Shock. But it was also because under Labour, under Gordon Brown, people had lost faith in some of the Treasury's own numbers, and there was a need to instill fiscal rectitude. And we believe in that. We're not scared of that. We want to ensure that we have fiscal stability, we have financial responsibility, and we believe in sound money. So we're going to work with the OBR, make it a better version of itself, and ensure that we have sound money at the heart of government policy going forwards. Daisy, please, from The Times.
Thank you. Just firstly, specifically following on student loans, you know, would you commit to reversing the government's decision to freeze the repayment threshold for 4 years, which effectively levied a £1 billion tax on graduates in the last budget? And secondly, you said in your speech that the Conservatives had delivered some commendable reforms to our welfare system. Could you set out what those commendable policies were, and will you rule out a return to the austerity policies of the Cameron government if you become Reform's Chancellor?
Well, I think I've said what I need to say on students. You know, I'm not going to make up policy here. It's very clear the approach that Reform is going to take. We're going to have a deliberate attitude toward policy. Things we say will be well thought through and fully costed, and nobody's going to be standing at podiums like this making stuff up on the hoof. With regard to, sorry, what was the second half of your question?
You said that
Oh, well, welfare reform, sorry, apologies. Look, we're fair-minded in Reform. We will praise things that were good, and we will oppose things that have been bad. The very early days of the last Conservative, in fact, coalition government, under Ian Duncan Smith, there were good reforms brought forward, which set out to make work pay. And as a result of that, the economy improved. There were more disabled people, for example, who were helped out of welfare and back into the workplace. Youth unemployment came down and remained relatively low compared to our competitors. And overall, employment levels were good in the country. And so let's be honest about that. And one of the reasons why that happened, incidentally, was that in opposition, careful thought and planning was taken to prepare those reforms. However, after COVID, it's been a complete mess. The benefits bill has ballooned. The last Conservative government clearly took far too long to respond to that. And as a result of that, millions of people are out of work, claiming benefits. The benefits bill is going to bankrupt this country. And we've got to ensure that we fix that, because we're not prepared to leave people in that situation. And taxpayers know it's unfair. I've got, next, we've got Jonathan Walker from The Express.
Thank you. I think it's clear from what you've said that you feel that the quantitative easing of the past was a bad idea. But what can the Bank of England really do today to control inflation more, apart from keeping interest rates high, which means presumably higher mortgages? And also, can I ask you, it is striking that at this point, you don't seem able to say that the party, quite able to say that the party is committed to the triple lock. Is it fair to say this is something that you've been taking a good hard look at?
No, it's something we're going to be talking about in the coming days. But look, I think I've been very clear on that, you know, your readers will not be disappointed by our view on that. We want to protect pensioners and those who rely on it. As regards to the Bank of England, I was very clear that the blame doesn't solely fit with the Bank of England. The furlough scheme pumped hundreds of billions of pounds into the economy and created massive inflation as a result. You've seen that with quantitative easing, both after the financial crash and during and after COVID as well. There is a role for government and the Chancellor, who has to ultimately take responsibility to be very careful with inflation, whether that's in those regards or with respect to public sector pay. And the message that I hope we've landed today is that Reform takes inflation extremely seriously. We've got now Alistair from Reuters.
Hi, thank you. You mentioned that you wanted fiscal headroom before you had any tax cuts. If you achieved that fiscal headroom, what would be the first tax cuts that you would prioritise? And just on the fiscal rules...
Well, just to be clear, I mean, if I haven't been already, we're not going to make tax and spend promises right now. So sorry to disappoint you on that front, but we're going to take these decisions in time very carefully.
Sure. And on the fiscal rules, would you be open to keeping the current fiscal rules if the feedback you get is that they work well, or even making them less restrictive? Or are you pretty sure that you want tighter fiscal rules and it's just about how it works?
I think we're going to have to take our time and work through this. It's only the second day in my position, but I've been clear. We're going to have strict fiscal rules, and the point is we're going to actually talk to market participants in the weeks and months to come. We're going to tour them, listen to their views, and develop them ahead of the next general election. William from the Press Association.
Hello. Hi. How would you, we've been talking about inflation today quite a lot, and we're inching towards that 2% target. Andrew, how would you rate Andrew Bailey's performance at the bank, and would you keep that target in place if you were to join the Treasury?
Well, I've been very clear. Of course, we're going to keep the target in place, and it's incredibly important to us. You know, reform serves working people, and we want to make sure we keep their bills down. At the moment, people are suffering because bills are far too high, and so that's going to be a major priority of our economic policy to find any ways, whether it's energy bills, water bills, you name it, to try and get those bills to come down. I've got Aggie from LBC.
Thank you very much. Robert Jenrick, can I just clarify your position on the minimum wage for younger workers? Because it sounds like, and indeed Richard Tice told us this on Monday night, that you are looking at cutting minimum wage for younger workers. If that's right, how much by, and also...
We're not, if I can stop you, we're not proposing to cut the minimum wage. The minimum wage will be set by Rachel Reeves and the government, long in advance of the next general election. So there's no suggestion of that. But I think there's a very legitimate concern about young people in the workplace right now. And we've got to ensure that we set policy accordingly. And we are concerned that increases that are being proposed are going to make it much more difficult for employers, particularly in some of those sectors that are under strain, like hospitality, to take young people on. But we're not going to cut the minimum wage, if that's your question.
Okay, so the minimum wage is going to remain the same. If the government raises it in government, if reform were there, you would keep it the same as what the government had raised it to.
We're not going to cut the minimum wage once it's been set. But it is right to raise concerns. I think, from what we've heard today, Rachel Reeves has recognised herself.
Great. And second question, you've nearly been in Reform UK, you've just been there over a month. What's the thing that surprised you the most in your new party?
The incredible energy, enthusiasm, momentum that there is. There's no other party like this in British politics, I can assure you. Right, I've got Emilio from Politico.
Hi, Robert. I've got two questions, if that's okay. You talked about the chaos that Liz Truss unleashed. So why didn't you resign from her front bench while she was doing it instead?
Well, I did resign from one Conservative government. I can't resign all the time.
Well, you could. If you really disagreed with the economic policies, why did you sit quietly there?
Well, if I can say that, I didn't sit quietly, as it so happens, as I think I think it's the book that Jeremy Hunt wrote will record that I phoned him up the weekend he became the Chancellor, told him exactly what I thought were the problems with the mini-budget and told him to reverse all of it. And he records that me and one other Conservative did that. So I made my views pretty clear at the time. And if I may say so, when I was standing to be leader of the Conservative Party, I was the only person who said that I thought that mini-budget was careless and cack-handed. And I've also pretty clearly said that I'm surprised that Liz Truss is still a member of the Conservative Party, but that's not my problem now, as they say.
Well, thank you for that. And I want to ask you about your new head of policy, James Orr, who last August he said that the Russian invasion of Ukraine is a regional Slavic conflict that he didn't care very much about. And he said that the UK approach of defending Ukraine is dangerous and championed the Hungarian approach, which is basically blocking support to Ukraine. Do you agree with that? And is this the man who should be devising foreign policy for reform?
Look, firstly, Reform's position is very clear. Reform stands with Ukraine and against oppressors like Vladimir Putin. There's no doubt about that. James is a very talented man who I've known for a long time. We worked together many years ago. He's one of the most intelligent, thoughtful people, fantastic understanding of policy, understanding of geopolitics. He's a great asset to the party. I'll go to Tim Stanley now from the Daily Telegraph.
Thank you. Good morning. Rob, when you were a Conservative MP, you said that Nigel must have, quote, had one too many pints before pledging to abolish the two-child cap.
No, I can't believe that's the case.
Well, you've clearly won the battle on this policy. So does this U-turn, plus keeping the OBR and keeping bank independence, represent the end of populism and reform and the Toryfication of the party? And on the policy itself, You say you want to be the party of alarm clock Britain, but as you know, working families also benefit from lifting the benefit cap, which is predicted to draw hundreds of thousands of people out of relative poverty. Suella Braverman, when she was a Conservative MP, described the cap as unfair and said it had pushed people into poverty. So can you today persuade Suella Braverman that she's wrong?
Well, let me be clear about this. The policy that the party adopted was well-meaning and was focusing support upon British workers and their kids. And look, we all want to see those people be able to have families and lead good lives. The issue is that our economy is in a mess, mainly as a result of disastrous decisions that have been taken, including latterly by Rachel Reeves. So we've got to live in the world as it is. Unfortunately, we can't afford to do this right now through welfare. There will be other ways in which we can help support and encourage families to prosper in the years ahead. But it's not going to be through welfare. That's why we've made this decision. It's a tough one, but it's an important one. And it shows our intent that Reform is not a party of welfare. We're going to be bringing forward serious reforms in the months ahead to bring down that welfare bill, help people back into the workplace, and ensure fairness for working people once again. I'll go to Will Hay. We're working through these. There's a few left, so we have to be a bit faster now. Will Hazel from the I.
Thank you very much. Robert, you mentioned labour rights as an area where Britain could gain a competitive edge, I think you said. Do you have any particular rights in mind which you think we should get rid of? And if I may, Nigel Farage is a very dominant figure in the Reform Party. Are you confident you will have the latitude you need to determine policy? And sometimes a Chancellor has to say no to their Prime Minister. Are you prepared to say no to Nigel?
Well, I've only worked with Nigel for a few weeks, but it's been extremely positive. I found him to be immensely hardworking, which I respect. Somebody with incredible knowledge and understanding of politics and the economy. Some real-world experience, who worked here in the city and is, rather different record to some of our chancellors and prime ministers. And somebody who is good at working with people, and that's exactly what we want to do. We want to have a good working relationship. Nigel is the leader of the party, so it's not surprising that at the end of the day, he's the person who makes the final decisions. And what a relief it is to be in a party with a strong leader who everyone respects. I think that would be a good thing generally for other political parties. I'll go to Max from Guido. Oh, sorry, on Labour Pos. Look, we could be, there are a number of examples. We'll be setting out more in the weeks and months to come. Richard, in particular, because he is the spokesperson on this, so I'll really leave it for him to speak to. But it's quite clear that much within the employment rights bill that's gone through Parliament has been immensely harmful to business, to confidence. It's contributed to the unemployment that we're seeing right now in the country, and we'll have to consider what within that bill we want to scrap to create a better environment for businesses. I've got Max now from Guido.
Hi, Robert. We're less than 2 months away from new compulsory rules requiring self-employed taxpayers to file tax information 4 times a year and buy expensive software in order to do so. What's your position on that? Will Reform pledge to reverse those rules? And if I may, you've taken an interest in the housing market. Are you considering pledging to abolish stamp duty?
Well, on both of those, look, we're going to think carefully about these things. We're not going to make up policy on the hoof, so you'll hear more from us on those topics, like stamp duty. But, what I've been very clear on today is that it's not just about tax cuts. We're certainly not going to do tax cuts that aren't fully costed and funded. We've got to find the headroom first. But we're also going to do the hard yards of supply-side reforms. And that means change to our planning system, and in particular, in those places, like inner East London, where there's immense potential to get building again with a zonal, more liberal planning system. So you'll certainly be hearing good stuff on that in the months ahead. I've got Athena from The Independent.
Hello. You've hit out at decades of mismanagement of the economy under the Tories. Given you were a part of that government, what specific decisions from that period do you now believe were mistakes? And why should voters trust your criticism of the system when you were a senior part of it?
Well, look, I don't think anybody has been more honest and reflective about the failures of the last Conservative government who was a part of it than me. I've been consistent in voicing the concerns about what that government got wrong. I urged the party to learn from its lessons and to be different. Ultimately, I concluded that it can't change, won't change, shouldn't be given the keys back to run this country, because that would be like giving the arsonists back control after they've just burnt the house down. There are a number of big mistakes. We've set out some of them today. The fact that welfare has ballooned, costing us billions, potentially bankrupting the country. The fact that serious planning reforms were ditched so that we didn't get young people onto the housing ladder. And the fact that under the Conservatives, particularly under Theresa May and then Boris, an absolutely disastrous energy policy was pursued that has deindustrialized our country and impoverished working people. Before you even get on to immigration, those things should be sufficient to say that this party cannot be trusted for many years to come. Now, I've got 4 more, so I need to get through this, 3 more, sorry, apologies, so I need to get through these quite fast. I've got Anna from the Financial Times. Anna.
Thanks for asking me a question. Richard Tice has warned companies that if reform wins power, it would strike down contracts that companies have already signed to provide the government with clean power. Do you agree with that policy, and will you proceed with that policy, or do you have concerns that it would create market instability and potentially reduce investment in Britain?
Look, it's very clear that one of the most important and radical reforms that a reform government would enact is a different energy policy for this country. We cannot allow the further deindustrialization of this country. We can't allow a situation where energy bills, industrial energy bills, are 5 or 6 times higher here than in the United States. So we have to change course. And if Ed Miliband thinks that he's going to spend the next year, 2 years, 3 years, however long it is, between now and the next general election, setting a booby trap for this country by choosing its energy mix for the next 20 years, then we do need to put him and some investors on notice that we're not going to allow that to happen. We're not going to allow our energy policy for the next generation to be determined now by a net zero zealot who doesn't seem to care about the competitiveness of our economy. So we'll give this careful thought, absolutely, but investors should take heed that we're serious when we say we're going to make this country competitive again, and we're going to bring back energy abundance again. I've got Alexandra from The Guardian.
Hello, you said today that the public is right to be wary of false prophets promising stability. Your party dropped plans for £90 billion worth of tax cuts 18 months after promising them. Nigel Farage has said he doesn't like banks. He was giving serious thought to scrapping the OBR and suggested he'd like to replace the Bank of England governor. In light of this, why should business leaders, financial markets and the City of London feel reassured today?
Well, look, I hope you've heard today the message that I've delivered. It's one where every policy that we announce is going to be fully costed, that we're going to find savings before we approach tax cuts, that we're going to crush the benefits bill to ensure that we actually get people back into the workplace, and that we're going to bring forward serious supply-side reforms. And I would question who you're comparing reform against. What, Liz Truss and the Conservative Party? That is an era of stability? Or Rachel Reeves and this Labour government? That is stability? Come on. What we're going to offer is the combination that this country is actually crying out for, which is seriousness of purpose, stability, but actually some radical policies to turn this country around. And if we get that balance right, then I think the next government under reform will be one of the most important for driving this economy forward for a very long time. And then lastly, but not least, we have Sophie from the Daily Mirror.
Sophie Huskisson from the Daily Mirror. So if you restore the 2-child benefit limit, are you comfortable with plunging hundreds of thousands of kids into poverty? And what is your plan to tackle the 4.5 million children in poverty?
Well, it's not about that. Of course we care about ensuring that people can have kids and those kids can lead fulfilling lives. We can't just do that by spending more and more on benefits. The country is going to go bankrupt. That is the course we're currently on. So someone has to instill some realism into this debate, and that is what we're going to do. We're going to get the benefits bill down. We're going to do so fairly, with concern for the genuinely vulnerable, but we are going to get it down, because there's no alternative. And we're going to find other ways in which we can support families and working people, like building some more homes, for example, like getting some good jobs going again, like bringing down people's bills with a different energy policy. This is going to be our approach, but if you think that we can just keep going on like Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves is, weekly, increasing the benefits bill, then you're on a course to bankruptcy, and Reform are not going to allow that to happen. Very good. Well, thank you all very much indeed for coming today, and thanks for your patience with all these questions. Very good to see you all.